Hello
guys, we're live, Carnivore Muscle Ramblings live Q&A, segment number 50. So we started this in, I think it was like December, January time this past year. And now we're on segment number 50 already. So we originally started doing 2 of these per week. I think we realized we got a bit burnt out. We started to do 1 a week, but we've just packed it in a bit more. So we try to be as helpful as you can. So this is the best place to get your carnivore muscle building and fat loss questions answered on the internet right now at this moment, I think. How you doing, Jerome?
Doing well, Jonathan. How are you?
Not bad. I've sorted out the green screen, I think, so I'm hoping that as the light goes down, as it gets darker, it doesn't like mess up my image too much. But yeah, not too bad. Yeah, so if anyone's got any questions, we're going to answer them in the chat. Super chat questions are prioritized, so they'll get looked at first. But we have been asked by Zbigniew today. I'm actually going to post it in the chat just so you guys can see the question. So Zbigniew asked, can you use priming to build more muscle? So probably outline what priming is. So for those of you that haven't yet seen my YouTube video, that is a video that's accessible via the YouTube channel membership option I do have right now. The cheapest rate is £1.99 or something, which is like $2.50. And this video will be available to everyone that's paid that amount and higher. Anyway, that goes through it and explains it all. The premise is you eat 3 square meals for 2 straight weeks. Some people do it for longer, but the 2-week mark is the goal. And you just have a carnivore diet consisting mostly of fatty meat. You can also have eggs, fish, like that. Basically, the idea is that you stuff yourself 3 times per day for 2 weeks straight. The premise of it, or the promise of it, actually, is to increase your metabolic rate, increase your adaptation, perhaps give you more energy and help set your leptin levels appropriately so you know when you're full versus not. Now, a lot of people come from disordered eating backgrounds when they restrict too much or binge too much, and they never actually work out how much they're meant to eat. So with this being a diet with, animal foods, meat and fat, the idea is that you get that satiation point accurate and on point. This would be a good question to answer, I think. So, Jerome, can you see any use for it for building more muscle?
Yeah, and I was going to give this another 30 seconds of thought, but I think I'm just going to wing it. Yes, assuming you're not basically already at your genetic potential for how much muscle you're capable of building. There's a common notion that I want to disavow a lot of people of, that you can't build muscle in a calorie or energy deficit, and that's demonstrably false. So while I think you can build more muscle if you have more resources available for your body to utilize, ultimately there's going to be a limit to how much muscle you can build how quickly. So really, if priming gives you an amount of food and an amount of utilizable energy substrate that is above what you were receiving, but still within the capacity of what you're capable of utilizing at any point, it can help you build more muscle. But if you're already eating an amount of protein that maximizes your muscle protein synthesis and an amount of energy substrate that is giving you decent energy and working you towards a favorable body composition, the introduction of massive amounts of food beyond that will not force additional muscle growth to take place. Any more than what your body can use in terms of that protein is either going to get converted into glucose and possibly stored, possibly turned to fat, or it's going to be deaminated and you're going to excrete a lot of it through your urine. Dietarily is stored initially, later oxidized. So yes and no, I would say, depending on the context. What do you think?
Yeah, certainly. So I think people that are chronically undereating, if they undertake this thinking, okay, I'm going to stuff myself for 2 weeks and I was chronically undereating, then yes, you're more likely to build more muscle mass because you're giving your body more resources to build muscle. And I think you touched on a good point about how your rate of muscle gain won't somehow magically increase because you're building upon your metabolism. You know, what we know about different scientific studies is people tend to get a good muscle growth result, perhaps in an experience maybe where they get maybe 6 to 8 weeks straight where they start to get a bit more muscle. Then beyond that, it sort of tapers off. So that's why bodybuilders nowadays are actually a bit more intuitive. They've kind of sussed this out, and they'll actually do a mini cut every few weeks or few months. And that'll be a case of just maybe a few days to a week to maybe even 2 weeks. They just reduce the body fat and get the body more sensitized to the materials such as protein. And I think my hypothesis is that we have a desensitization to protein as we increase the protein intake. So more protein won't be more muscle, sort of thing. And I think every time we hit that muscle protein synthesis signal over and over again, you can keep pressing that button, but it doesn't mean that more growth comes out. And I think once you get past that point, it starts to really go to a halt. So something like this could be used as an adjunct to gain body weight if you're trying to increase strength to increase muscle. But I think when you get to the point where you're stuffing yourself to the point where you can't sleep properly, your recovery is ineffective, you're incapacitated when you're training in the gym, you're not fit enough because your heart's pounding so much because you've got so much food in you, then your training's going to go backwards, your recovery is going to go backwards, and from there, your muscle growth will go down. You'll be less muscular as a result of it. So for me, it's always a case of adding protein on as per requirements of the person's training volume, training intensity, and what they're trying to achieve at that time. So people that are very, very busy, people that are very active, they'll have a higher protein intake, a higher fat intake, and they'll actually increase that if they become more active or decrease that if they become less active. And Jerome's completely right. There are instances of people where they eat in a food or mass deficit and they can still build muscle mass. I'm a perfect example of that. I gained, I'd assume, about 30 to 40 pounds of my muscle growth when I first started training over about 3-4 years or something. And I did that in what they'd call a caloric deficit. So I was actually eating next to nothing. I was eating like a pasta pot each day, one chicken breast and a protein shake, and sometimes I'd have a bag of Haribo or a packet of crisps or something. There's no way I was eating enough food to fuel someone that was training 15 hours per week in the gym and in athletics tracks. So that kind of tells me, as much as it is a mass in, mass out kind of thing, the hormonal element certainly comes into it. So I'll be looking at this from the standpoint of perhaps some days you can eat a bit more and some days you eat a bit less. So your diet would almost match your training and vice versa. So I think trying to force muscle on wouldn't be as effective, at least long term. You always get a feedback response from your body to stop doing it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, great question. Do you see any more questions?
I think right below it. It's not tagged, but it's...
Oh, yes. Hi, Rick. How's it going? Thanks, everyone, for joining the chat, by the way. Appreciate you being here. So Rick has asked, has anyone performed a detailed experiment of food calorimetry where NH bench was compared to poop output versus the bomb calorimeter? That's a good question. Yes, so fecal waste has been measured in response to mass input. But when it comes to energy expenditure, I don't know. But you probably could equate it somehow if you did some detailed mathematics. All I'm going to say is I believe they say something like 10 grams of fat comes out of fecal matter, or 10%. I can't remember. But this information is out there. But most things are waste from the guts, the gut lining, old cells, old tissues, things that your body doesn't need anymore, fiber, things like that. But yeah, imagine, I don't know. What do you think, Jerome? I'm just going to bring on Sophie as well.
Yeah. If my understanding is correct, they have done studies to kind of affirm the initial measurements of the calories and different macronutrients. While they were initially measured in a bomb calorimeter, I think studies have been done where people have been locked in a metabolic ward. Their food intake has been measured. Same with the amount of like latent heat that they give off. Changes in respiratory quotient, and then also their waste has been measured. So I think that was done in the 70s or so as a way to kind of confirm the macronutrient amounts or the calories per macronutrient. And I feel bad because I've read about this recently, but they've also done this across like various species to kind of see if other animals' digestion works similar to humans, and the calorie number essentially holds steady for all animals.
Sophie, can you weigh in on poop and energy expenditure?
No.
No.
Just
Next
that everyone's
question.
probably full of shit, so just get it out. You know what I mean?
Most certainly, yeah. That seems it. Yeah, for those of you who don't know, this is Sophie, my partner. Subscribe to her channel if you have not yet already. It is just Muscle Mama Sophie, which is what you see on the screen right now. You can't really miss her. She's got, I think it's baby blue and pink writing as her picture or something. I don't know.
Think so.
But she's easy to find. So
yeah,
she's the one with like a million subscribers.
I know, 87 of them, I think.
All 87.
All 87.
Pretty good.
I've just noticed my picture looks like a funny colour because I have a crack right over my front camera lens. I've just noticed the difference.
Not too bad. It just looks a bit dusty.
Yeah.
Yeah, it looks like it's got a dusty sort of bit on it.
No, it's my cracked camera. So, soz, guys. I have to edit that out, Jonathan. Sorry about that.
We've got a question from Rise Stronger. Please put a Q before your questions, or I'll miss it like I missed it the first time.
Dun, dun, dun.
Henceforth, the bottom it says, leave your questions in the live chat with a Q, so I can see it.
Feel free to do a super chat. It really enhance it.
Super chats definitely enhance it. They're much more visible. Should we worry about omega-6 on pork or just ignore it and eat like a primitive warrior? I think the omega-6 to omega-3 ratio in carnivore diets is overstated. I mean, if someone's just eating pork, I don't think that's going to be healthy long term. Then you have to look at the epigenetics of the person that's eating a diet with that. Do they somehow synthesize more omega-3 from plant material to make up for that discrepancy? I don't know. But I think a diet rich in ruminant meat is probably the most effective. You can add on pork, things like that. Jerome and I we're pretty firm in our belief it's probably about 80% of food intake should be ruminant meat. The rest can be whatever you want, pretty much, as long as it's from an animal. Yeah, we're looking at something like 1 to 20 in terms of omega-3 to omega-6 in some cases, with it being pork. We're looking at beef being like 1 to 4 or something like that. So I think in the grand scheme of things, unless it's the only meat that you're eating, it probably wouldn't be the worst thing to worry about. You're doing a lot better than eating peanut butter, which is like 1 to 1,000 or something stupid, or 100, I don't know. Jerome, what do you think?
Yeah, I don't have much to add to that. There was a website that I used to go on where you could look up the omega-6 to 3 ratios of almost any known source of fat, and it would have a variety of even fat sources. Would look up tallow versus suet versus the fat that lines the stomach. Forgive me for not remembering what that is. Corn oil, olive oil, and stuff like that. And even pork is a little bit higher in terms of that ratio, but it's still significantly lower than having a diet that the predominant amount of your fat is coming from plant-based seed oils. So 80% is a good number. Not to get too far into it, but the Okinawans, who are hailed as a blue zone, pre-World War II ate tons of pork. It was a cultural norm that I think they had an expression that the diet starts with pork. And granted, their pigs were probably fed a more species appropriate diet than how a lot of our pork is fed nowadays. But if you crave pork, and some people do a little bit better on it, listen to your body in that regard, and that'll kind of sort things out. So I think it's hard to go wrong for the most part eating like a primitive warrior.
Oh yes. Yeah, the website I think is nutritiondata.self.com or something like that. If you type in nutritiondataself.com, it'll tell you the composition of the fatty acids, and it'll say all these like weird little things about omega-3, omega-6 fats you would never have thought it existed in food.
You've been on that website
about you eat pork. Yeah.
I do, yes. We normally eat it when Jonathan's not here, just because he doesn't eat it, so it just makes it easier. We don't have to worry about swapping pans in between, because obviously he can taste. If I was to cook sausages in the pan and then he cooks his chicken or whatever, he'll be able to taste it, and obviously it's not then fair on him. But I mean, like the boys have said, with what you eat, if it's mostly animal products, I wouldn't worry about the omega-6 to 3 ratio on pork itself, and there's a lot of worse things to be eating. So nothing else to add, really. You boys have said it. I may as well not be here. I mean,
Well said. Excellent.
We're glad you're here, Sophie. You bring a nice
It's been a
balance
while.
to this.
Balance of testosterone.
It does. Well, I don't know. Probably a bit manly for a woman.
No.
Don't agree. Dick.
On that point, Matthew said that omega-3 to 6 ratio for lamb. Yeah, it's completely right. Lamb does have a lot of omega-3 in it, which is bizarre. The strange thing about animal fats that I find quite unusual is that when you cook any animal and render the fat in it, the omega-3 actually retains its form for the most part. Whereas when you do the same with plant oils, they go rancid. So your farmed salmon with omega-3 in it, once you cook that, it'll still have a sufficient amount of omega-3 in it versus another food which has omega-3 in it, which is quite strange. So, I mean, I have a bit of an aversion to lamb when I eat too much. Like I can have it sometimes, but I do like it. But sometimes I'm like, the fat for me is too much sometimes. So
yeah, we don't have that as often, really. Actually,
no, I've had the last year. We've had lamb twice. I've had it we've had it twice.
Yeah, maybe 3 times pushing it at a barbecue, and even then, I don't think that would have been like a lamb kofta or something. But yeah, we don't have it. I think we tend to have beef or chicken, don't we? Actually, and then we just add butter to the chicken to fatten it up.
Do you guys have any thoughts to there being an ideal omega-6 to 3 ratio?
Yes.
I've heard as low as some people saying 1 to 1. That seems really hard to get to. I'd just be curious on you guys, unless Jonathan's going to do a whole video on this at some point.
You sport it now. Yeah, I've got 1 to 1 myself.
Okay.
Yeah, I've got 1 to 1. I think if your omega-3 goes so high for your diet, I feel like it'll balance out the omega-6 quite well. I've got a feeling, I can't support this with any facts or science at all, but I've got a feeling if you're healthy, your body will retain a better omega-3 to 6 ratio despite your diet having a high omega-6 to omega-3 ratio. And I understand, obviously, omega-3 and omega-6, like when the fat goes, when you eat the fat, that's what your body is made out of. That's how it creates the cells. Obviously, our cells aren't entirely omega-3 because we wouldn't survive. We wouldn't have enough inflammatory properties of omega-6 and other omegas to repair ourselves. But that is something I'd be interested in finding out. But yeah, my omega-3 to 6 ratio is 1 to 1. But I think anything less than 1 to 10 is good. The way you fall on that scale is going to be completely individual to you. I think a lot of people, I mean, you can test for this in your blood. Maybe 1 to 5 or something. I don't know. That's a good question.
Okay. Yeah, I wrote that down.
How do you test for it in your blood? Like, what do you ask the doctor? I mean, I've got a blood test on Monday, so I might ask them to do it at the same time.
They won't do it because it's such a specific test. So they don't identify deficiency in omega-3. They'll just say, I'll have some fish oil capsules. But that would be under the assumption that your diet is otherwise clean. Now, if your diet isn't clean, i.e. you're eating peanut butter and seed oils, that 2-3 grams of omega-3, it's probably rancid as hell in capsules anyway, isn't going to do anything. So you can get it tested. I got it tested privately. But usually you have to pay a bit more to get that sort of thing tested. And the same is true with some other specific vitamins. Yeah, I think 1 to 1's excessive. I don't think I need that. I think 1 to 3 to 4 to 5 is good. But there seems to be some correlation or association with cognitive function and good omega-3 status, especially for people with like autism and stuff like that. So for me, it's been quite helpful. Then again, omega-3 rich foods are going to be lower in deuterium in most cases, or if not all cases. So that can tells me it's going to be healthier, not because necessarily of the omega-3 alone, but other things as well. So you always have to look at a thing broadly speaking. But what it always comes down to is people can look at all these measurements for 3 to 6 ratios, these numbers. We'll just stick to a carnivore diet and do some effective exercise. That's about it. Just to make sure what you're doing isn't stupid. You're not eating, I don't know, eggs only. You're not eating, I don't know, or training like 20 times a week. It's all about being just relatively in the middle, conservative, and just following along with your goal.
I would have to check, but at least here in the States, there's a website that maybe Jonathan does the same thing. A lot of bodybuilders will use a website like Private MD Labs where you can order a lab test, like a full blood panel. Because a lot of times if you go to your primary and you tell them you just want blood work done and just see where you're at, make sure you're healthy, at least doctors I've had in the past won't show you the numbers. They'll just tell you everything is fine or this is a little high, but I won't actually be able to see my full blood panel, full hormone panel, fasted blood glucose, fasted insulin, all these things that I would like to have. So websites exist like Private MD Labs where you can just order whatever lab tests you want and you go to a place, they draw blood, then you get your numbers directly emailed to you. And this is big among bodybuilders who want to make sure that when they're using a bunch of supplements that it's not like destroying their body. But it's useful in other contexts as well. So hope you don't mind I brought that up.
Yeah, you're correct. I mean, I get mine done by a few companies. I got it done by Medichecks recently, which is quite a good company over here. So what I do is you literally pay the money. They send you off the kit that you asked for. I asked for a private home visit kit. I don't tell them, but I draw the blood myself from my arm, then post it to them. I walk up to the post box up the road and plop it in that day. And I get the results back within about 3 days usually. But some of the tests take a bit longer to run, but yeah, that's effectively it. You can get different panels done, so you can get like a very generic testosterone panel, a vitamin panel, mineral panel, or you can get the whole works. The last one I got, I think, was about 100 quid or something. I got everything tested that I'd probably worry about or be concerned about, so I'm quite happy with that. It's something I usually would be doing, I'd say about 3 times per year. That's about how much I would be doing it. I think that's with specific things, though. If you're trying to nail something, like right now, I'm trying to get my liver function as good as I can. Because I feel like that could be a missing link. So my liver's always been it's not been bad, but it's just been a bit on the borderline. So it's something I want to improve a bit. But I feel like while I'm at it, while I'm drawing blood out my arm, I might as well just get everything tested. So I don't mind paying a bit more money and see what's going on. Yeah, brilliant.
Especially the doctors here don't do it.
No, you can't. It's the same in the States. I think you can't get them to do anything. You can get, if you say, "Oh, I'm depressed," okay, well, here's vitamin D test. They wouldn't test anything else. That would be pretty much it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, because like I've got blood test on Monday, and if the doctors obviously said test for something specific, but if I was to say, "Can you also test for this as well?" If the doctor's not said it, they won't do it, and it's like, but you're already taking my blood, so you may as well test it at the same time.
Yeah, so different tests do have different costs for each of them. So although it makes sense, yes, if you take someone's blood, you might as well just run all the tests. But the problem is someone always has to interpret them on the other side. They can't just tell you a result. There has to be an interpretation. So that takes up more of their time. So if you're asking for every test known to man, someone's got to read all that out to you or type it all out, so it makes it less efficient. It's just a pain in the backside. But I've done it a few times that way, but they don't really test the right things, and they're not that quick at updating the system, so it's a big pain over here.
The CBC blood panels, and maybe I'm dating myself here, when I was in college, we used to have to do them by hand. You would get somebody's blood under a microscope, and you would scan a certain number of basically viewing areas, and then you would make a larger calculation based on the number of white blood cells and other things that you saw in their blood. Now it's all done by computer, at least with the basic blood panel. But yeah, any kind of hormone testing that they do in some of these other tests require more in-depth lab work. But for somebody who wants a snapshot into their health, and ever since I was 300 pounds, same kind of thing, I get a full blood panel, blood and hormone panel once to twice a year, just to kind of get a general snapshot in my health. Again, that's only indicative of where you were at in that moment that blood work was taken. So you need to take it with a grain of salt, but it's really cool to actually kind of see what's going on under the hood and actually look at your numbers and kind of understand what some of these things mean.
Yeah. We'll go on that tangent. We'll get back to this one. We've got a question. So Andre asked, in your experience when eating to satiety on a carnivore ketogenic diet and performing high intensity exercise, does your appetite drop on training days and rise on rest days, aka fluctuations in appetite? I would say not for me, but I think just because, I mean, it depends how busy. If I'm very busy, then and say I was doing 3 meals per day a month or two ago, and I found that was, enough, then yeah, I'm not really going to be eating that much. Whereas if I've done nothing all day, and say I'm just looking after Maddie or something at Sophie's place, and that's all I've done all day, I've not done anything else, no work, then I might be more tempted to eat more food because, when you're feeding someone else, you think, well, maybe I should eat as well. You're more idle. So for me, it's more of a case of how idle I am. The more idle I am, the more I think about food. So for me, I have to be a bit strict and just have a cutoff, which is quite important to me. But yeah, I do know some people. I know Mark Strauth that does that kind of way of eating. He eats more on training days, less on off days. I know Arjan Maya, high intensity trainer. He's on YouTube. He does the same thing. So he eats more on training days. I think Jerome would probably instinctively do that as well, if he's having like a 2 or 3 day a week gym session. So how about you guys? What do you guys do?
If I was meal planning it, I would eat more on my training day to kind of compensate for some of the energy expenditure from the actual exercise. But if I were to follow my appetite, I actually fall very strongly into like what Andre suggested. Usually the days that I train, I'm not too terribly hungry the rest of the day, but the day after my workout and possibly even the day after that, my appetite is almost ravenous and almost insatiable. So I tend to, when I look and feel my best, I try and keep it as consistent as possible. I tend to think I could probably overeat very easily if I followed my appetite to satiety around my workouts.
That's interesting. Yeah. What about you, Sophie?
Just going to start with little shit for starters.
It's not nice of you to call me that.
Well, sorry about that, Jerome. It's more aimed at the bald one next to you. Stop fucking around with it. You're so distracting.
Why do I look so red?
Because you got a red screen behind you.
Because you're upset.
No. Upset.
Because you're so
Angry.
sad that I'm not there. That's your problem.
Yes.
Well, then he should be blue.
Wow. I think I tend to feel hungrier on training days, just because obviously you're moving more, so you are, like you say, using more energy. But then, like Jonathan, if I'm doing literally nothing, I then think about food more, and I'll go to keep picking at stuff because I'm just doing nothing. Which is why the evenings, when I was heavier and not on like a weight loss plan, the evenings were the worst because the kids are in bed. I got nothing to do. I got no distractions. You just sit, put the telly on, and then you end up just picking at stuff out of boredom. But I mean, now that I do 2 meals a day, I'm normally fine, but sometimes I get to the evening and I am feeling a bit hungry. So I just listen to my body and I'll have a little something and it's still kind of fine. But I think if you're going with your hunger signals and, what your body's saying, then I don't think it makes a difference. But when I was like tracking, I never changed my macros for a training day or a rest day. My macros were the same every day. And then obviously if I felt like I needed a bit more one day, then I'd have it and then I'd see the difference on the scale, whether it made a difference or not. But
yeah, I've always kept it the same myself because I train about 4 times a week most of the time. I think when you get beyond that, like twice a week training, I think you might just keep it steady. I think because when you're training 4 times a week, you've got something either end of either day that you are training. So you got a rest day. So I'm thinking, like, for myself, I don't really need to change it that much. I mean, the way I've always done my diet, so if I'm honest, unless I've deliberately tried to stick to a given macro amount, I've always ballparked it. So I know for myself, if I'm on a fat loss diet like I am right now, been cutting now for about 5 weeks or something, if I know that eating 20 grams extra of protein on a given day will stop me binge eating the next day, or tucking into more food the next day, I'm going to do it, because that's a better calculated cost for me. Whereas if I know, okay, I've not eaten enough food, I've not hit a starting point, I'm going to go to bed, I'm going to be starving, hungry, I'm not going to recover well, I'm going to wake up hungry, my stomach growling in the night. Yeah, it's a better decision to actually eat more. My fat loss results will be better eating more food. So that's not something people should just haphazardly do. You have to have quite a lot of intuition and experience doing that to know how much it is that you are hungry versus you're just bored. But right now I am ravenous and starving. I've been on my fat loss protocol for the last 2 weeks, which is tough. It's been very effective, actually, but I just wanted to experiment one last time before I release the video of what that is, basically. So keep your eyes peeled for that video. It's basically like a rapid fat loss protocol. You can do it for about 2 to 3 weeks, but you probably wouldn't want to do it past that point. I've been really hungry recently. I've been waking up at about 5 in the morning, just stomach growling. I've been doing 2 meals a day, so I've not eaten from about 2 p.m. till 8 a.m. the next day, most days. But yeah, I'm struggling, honestly. So actually, yesterday I ate way more food. Had a little off-plan meal, so that was a nice treat. That was definitely worth it. It wasn't that bad. Like, we're in the past where I've done a diet and I've like not really had an end goal or competition. I've sort of said, okay, I'm gonna have this thing and this thing and this thing. Or I just had this one thing and it wasn't that bad for me, knowing how much I can eat. I wasn't even eating my baseline food amount with that off meal. So for me, it was worth it. And what I usually experience is, if it's a 1 day refeed or 1 meal refeed, I find that my metabolism's a bit more fired up. So I'll start to feel hungrier the next few days and the fat will come off quicker. If I do it for 2 days, it does that even more. But 3 days puts me in a vicious cycle where I'm constantly thinking about how much food I got to eat on those 2 days or 3 days. So for me, 1 to 2 day refeeds are useful. If I was very heavy doing a very long diet, then I'd be doing a refeed every maybe 6 to 8 weeks, and that'd be like a 1 week free feed. It wouldn't be like a 2 day thing. So yeah, I'm not the biggest fan of massive fluctuations in food intake, but it is much more useful if you're training very infrequently, I think.
Yeah. And for what it's worth, to kind of support that, I have a client that recently came to my studio wanting to lose 30 pounds, who probably almost half of the week would eat very, very little 3 days, 1 meal a day, but that one meal was like sub 1,000 food calories. And then the other days she would eat not a crazy amount by any extent, what most of us would consider to be an appropriate amount of food, but she was having trouble losing weight. And I'm a very big believer that her inconsistency with having a number of days that are relatively normal and a number of days that are very, very little has basically got her metabolism slowed down quite a bit. And that having 7 days a week of relatively consistent eating up to the same amounts will get her metabolism up to that. And then from there, we can take these little tiny skims. There's a time and a place for things like fasting and intermittent fasting, but in general, with the number of contests that Jonathan and I have done, like, consistency is key. And the more consistent you can be with your diet, like, your body adapts to that, and then you make the necessary changes, and change will happen in your physique. But if you're all over the place, how the hell do you know what change to integrate to start seeing positive adaptations? So,
yeah,
that's a great point. Yeah, Sophie's had a very incremental kind of, should I say, like a very measured kind of adaptation to like different diets and training methodologies. So she was training a lot more a while ago, but now she's just going with the flow a bit more, trying to release some of that stress a little bit. She's been doing more longer walks, some with like weight in a rucksack, things like that. For her, it's probably more helpful, it's more sustainable, She doesn't have that guilt when she can't do it.
No, exactly. And I think that's helped a lot. And then taking the stress away, because I've not tracked a single thing. I've not used my app in like a month, and I think it's been about a week since I've been doing Too Mad, and again, not tracked a single thing. I think I subconsciously track, because obviously I did it for a year of weighing fucking everything, so I kind of have a look of that, roughly this, and oh, I'm going to need a little bit more protein. I don't think I've hit it. And then if I really don't think I've hit enough, if I'm sat in the evening and I'm like, why am I so starving? I'll then quickly do it on the app to be like, oh, that's why, because I've not had enough. And I think it's helped. Like I've lost in the space of the week, I've lost about 600, 700 grams. And again, it's been like normally a steady flow with the odd day of a little up, but it's helped. So I think I'll stick with how I'm going at the minute. But yeah, I haven't been able to do gym sessions, and I think I did a video. I don't know when that's airing actually. I'll have to talk to my production team as to when it's airing. And I said about the gym, if I haven't done it properly, and I just think if I really wanted to do it, I would have found the time to do it. So I obviously think I've lost the love a bit for it, because that was the thing that had to be sacrificed all the time. And it did get sacrificed all the time. Whereas now I do a definite walk at least 2 days a week. The third day is with a friend. And then I try and just get at least 5,000 steps in a day. And then I don't then feel as bad if I can't do it, because I've done quite a good amount already, kind of thing. And then if I have chance, I'll pick up some dumbbells and do some bits.
Yeah.
Chuck them in my bag and off I go.
Must be a nice experience to just like say, I've not trained in like a few days now. I can train pretty much whatever I want because I'm recovered. Just like do some dumbbell curls or something. That's me. I wouldn't even. I dare pick up a weight unless I knew it was that training day.
Well, I think I do quite a lot of technically strength training anyway. I'm picking the kids up all the time. Maddie's not exactly light, like she's 12 kilos, which I know doesn't sound a lot, but when you're constantly basically RDLing a baby all the time, fucking deadlifting a child, it's constant. And she's in a little clingy stage of every single time I put her down, she's like, Mom, Mom. So it's like a constant squat to pick up. So I'm constantly working out anyway, let's be honest.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm a bit more active now. Forced activity. So I'm doing the days I can, like a 10 to 15 minute walk with the dog, which is a lot for me. Not too bad. I feel like when I walk, my hip's going to pop out of joint after about 10 minutes or so, which is actually one of the worst things. But I like walking the dog. I tend to sleep better and I feel better once I've been outside, because where I live, we've got the river behind our house. We've got nature reserve, very pleasant, calm atmosphere to be in, which sometimes is quite good for the brain. You're stuck indoors all day staring at a screen, pissing about making videos. It's like, it's not a way to live, is it? It's not very present. So it's quite enjoyable spending some time with George. And George has been very affectionate with me recently. He's been like sitting on me and stuff. So that's always a pleasure.
George is a dog,
Lots of dog
by the
fur
way,
there.
everybody.
George is a dog.
In case people are wondering, because it's quite a human name.
We've got a question from Ben. I'll let Jerome answer this one first, I think.
Good, yeah. Good.
Sure.
Is ApoB a concern on the carnivore diet?
Oh, here comes the disappointing answer. Don't know. So I would, I mean, everything is context specific, and too much of anything is probably bad. But I know Sean Baker recently put an image up from a study showing days fasted as it tracks with like cholesterol, ApoB, and IGF-1 and some other thing. But oddly enough, the longer we fast, both total cholesterol and apolipoprotein B both increased significantly. So I would lean in the direction in general. It's probably nothing of concern, but I feel like my lack of physiology here is would keep me from taking a firm stance. So what do you guys think?
Sophie, what do you think?
Absolutely no idea. Pass.
So Professor Bart Kay's got some good videos in this one. I think he's of the opinion, he may have changed it. He's of the opinion that it's no concern at all on the carnivore diet. The way he kind of says a lot of things is like, we have different molecules in our body to deal with different things at different times to different degrees. And when you put your body through an extreme stress of some kind, it has some reaction. So, for example, people that are very physically active tend to have high creatinine levels when they have a blood test or a urine test. They get a lot of urea. Now that's just the body doing its processes, but the hard thing to measure or quantify is that a stress to the body, but it's just providing a kind of bit of resilience to it, or is it a distress to the body which is actually damaging it and causing harm long term? Now, from my understanding, ApoB isn't a concern on the carnivore diet because it's just a stress to the body and it's dealing with it as it should be. So that's my very rudimentary understanding of it. We didn't look this up. We didn't look into this at university, funny enough, which I was quite surprised in. But maybe it's a bigger thing than I thought. But I don't know. If it didn't come up in my university degree, I don't know what to say. It's probably such a minute thing that I wouldn't really worry about. Sophie or Jerome or myself, do I have any questions, or vice versa?
Had the microphone muted. Sorry about that. I wanted to give a quick plug to your members only section. Jonathan had a video that was quite interesting to watch on dry fasting that I won't spoil. Where you sat down and we're asking Bart K a few questions about it. So eventually that will hit the channel in due time. And that was a really interesting video to watch. And you've done a couple of about 24-hour dry fasts. Is that right? Or just the one?
About 24 hour, I think, something like that. Yeah, I feel like I can get to 20-hour mark very easily if I just think I'm going to do it. Yeah. But then it's weird. It's as if I start thinking about food. Like I don't feel thirsty. I don't feel hungry. I think the hunger sets in about 12, 14 hours, but then it's like, it disappears pretty much. So it's not a case of me feeling bad. It's more, I don't know if it's like boredom or like an emotional desire to eat. Or like, because, you know, if I've been eating every day of my life for the last 28 years and one day I say I'm not going to do it for a whole day, well, that's completely unusual. It's really unique because my body doesn't like it. At least my mind doesn't like it. So I don't know. I'll be interested in trying that more.
Yeah. And if you don't mind me asking, was that just like an intellectual curiosity? You just wanted to see what it was like? Or given that dry fasting is so often associated as like a healing protocol, was there something you were trying to see if it would make your body feel different or would heal something up? You know, kind of what caused that?
Yeah. I kind of thought I've been getting more inflammation around my knees recently and my feet, and I kind of attribute that to like some of my hip stuff. What it is, I want to try and speed up my healing of my nerve in my hip and back. That seems to be a bit sore at the moment. Or it's been sore for a long time, but I'm wondering how much of it makes a difference. So I'm thinking, what if I just follow the carnivore diet and eat sensibly and just not take the mick in the gym for, say, 6 months and that heals it? Okay, fine. Then if I threw in a 24, 48, 72-hour dry fast, would that then speed that up by like a month or two? I don't know. It's more curiosity than anything. Sure. It's not really a... But then I guess at the same time, it's a bit of a challenge as well. Like, if you want to talk about different topics on your YouTube channel, you should at least try it. I can just go by what people say, and I can say from the short duration I've done it, I can maintain dry fasting for 16 hours a day every single day without any issues at all. It's just beyond that point is a bit unknown area at this moment. But I'd look into doing that. And yeah, the 3-day fast for stem cell release would be something I'm looking to do as well. What about you, Sophie? Have you tried this at all?
Well, I've done a couple of just normal fasts, and I think I did about a 40-hour one. And I mean, I did drink then, because I think for my brain, I like the fact of if I want to drink, I will have a drink. I think it's when you then say to yourself, you can't have this, you can't have that. You just want it more, which is obviously, what is it called, like psychological mind fuck or something? I don't know. But it's like you tell a kid, don't press that button, they're going to press it. Yeah. So I think when my mouth gets all dry, I don't like that feeling. So I'd rather have a sip of a drink. It's like I was doing it where I have my 2 meals and I haven't put a time limit on my 2 meals just because of like work and obviously with the kids. I can't always guarantee to be able to have eaten my lunch by 2 p.m. So I just kind of said, right, after my second meal, that's it. And I was trying to not drink afterwards. And I think it was fine. And then I think I had like a shot, so like 25 mils of liquid at like 6 p.m. because I felt my mouth was getting a bit dry and I didn't like that feeling and I didn't want to go to bed like that. Which obviously I know technically isn't a dry fast, but I think with that tiny amount of liquid, would it have made a difference? I don't really know, but yeah, I mean, I'd be interested in trying a dry fast. I just feel like as soon as I say to myself, right, I can't have a drink, if I'm sat doing nothing all day, I'm just going to think about it. Whereas if I'm busy, it's not going to bother me. Same with eating. If I'm busy, I could happily go all day without eating. And I used to do that when I used to work for my dad. We did like a 3 a.m. till 11 p.m. and we didn't eat anything until 5 p.m. because we were just busy. We didn't think about it. And it was only because somebody offered it to us. We were like,
Yeah.
oh shit, yeah, we didn't eat, did we? At all day. But yeah.
Jerome, have you done any long water fasts out of interest?
Yeah, I've done a 7-day water fast on water and electrolytes, and I've done 2 3-day dry fasts. And I would like to do a longer dry fast, just for the discipline. And both have been very interesting and kind of enlightening. But for me, I seem to undertake fasts when I have a lot going on, and I kind of need everything to kind of come back into focus and into perspective. Because if you're depriving yourself of food for a couple of days, or especially if you're depriving yourself of water, all the other shit that people have going on in their lives tends to not bother you as much when you're thinking like, I haven't had water in 3 days. Those little things tend to not matter as much. So for me, it's usually kind of get back to like a mental and emotional equilibrium, and then kind of self-development past that. So that's why I was curious why you were doing it. Oddly enough, with you generally training 4 days a week, I'm impressed that you could even really do any dry fasting at all without having a significant effect on performance. Unfortunately, there's so little literature around dry fasting. Most of it is done on people who fast during Ramadan and don't have any food or any drink while the sun is up, and kind of intermittently dry fast. And there's some promising information about that. And a lot of anything beyond that tends to be mostly anecdotal and speculation based on the physiology, especially around autophagy. But at some point, I would like to do a 5-day dry fast, maybe longer. I'd like to do at least 10 days on water and electrolytes. But that's almost exclusively just for the self-discipline.
Yeah. I don't know. I think a 5-day one would be a good goal. I think for people like us that are relatively healthy, I'd say about 3 days is about as much as most people want to do without like impacting results or being an absolute pain in the backside.
Yeah.
Like I'm sure you could take like 3 days off work sort of thing, and I could as well if I wanted to probably. So a three days seems to give you that benefit, but they talk about these extra things that happen, these crises that happen at like day, I think say 7 and 11 or something.
Mhm.
Well, I don't have cancer, so I don't need to do that. I think people look for this gold star number. I think that's not really important. So like what Sophie said about like, I had a bit of water or something. It doesn't matter. The thing is, you did something that's difficult. You challenge yourself, and everything else is just was it? There's a word for it. I don't know. But yeah, my longest water fast was like 2 weeks. I didn't lose any weight. I told people this before. Everyone thinks I'm talking crap, but I honestly didn't lose any weight. I was drinking a lot of water.
Yeah, I remember you was younger, wasn't you? You didn't eat for 2 weeks.
Yes, I swear to God, it was either 10 days or 14 days. I remember having it like that sort of amount of time, and I just drank water. I didn't even have salt, believe it or not. And I added some lemon juice sometimes for one of those like squirt ball things, and that was it. But yeah, it was a weird experience. I don't even know why I did it. I think I thought I was fat. I don't know. Very bizarre.
Yeah.
You got a question now about from Ben, who asked, can doing an intense workout the day before blood testing drastically alter lipid numbers? My triglycerides came out abnormally high, 200 milligrams per deciliter, when it's usually low. That's surprising because when you exercise, they would have been oxidized, used for energy. So that number would theoretically go up, either in anticipation for exercise or from the exercise itself. I don't know. I think that's quite strange. I think it's an anomaly personally, but that's my best guess. What do you think, Jerome?
Yeah, I would say at least in terms of like LDL and total cholesterol, it absolutely can go up significantly. Your body it makes almost all of the LDL it needs. I guess it eventually makes all of it, but a lot of it's new every day. Your body is making VLDL, which as it transports cholesterol and triglycerides and free fatty acids to cells throughout the body, it drops these materials off and the particle shrinks and becomes LDL and then all that good stuff. But um, if you're putting a massive physical stress on the body, your body is going to make more LDL to transport more cholesterol to your body so that it can heal. And similarly, if you were exercising, I could understand how more triglycerides would be mobilized as a potential source of fuel um, to use throughout your activity. But that's probably dependent on what type of activity you were doing, how hard you were training, what type of activity. And I would just draw an analogy to Sean Baker. One of the first blood tests that he ever did that he put out online, uh, he was getting harassed quite a bit because his fasted blood glucose was pretty high. Well, the guy is a world-class athlete who works his ass off and is constantly training, not just in rowing, but in a wide variety of strength training and more cardiovascular type activity. And as such, that fasted blood glucose is normal to be elevated. So depending on how long this blood test was done after your exercise, what type of exercise, I could certainly understand how both, LDL, total cholesterol, and even triglycerides could be elevated. I wouldn't worry about it. Unfortunately, most of those blood tests want you to be fasted for like 12 hours
Mm.
before you get a blood draw, but I don't think that's nearly long enough. I think for most people, that should probably be closer to 24 to 36 hours. And with no significant hard physical activity, probably within that same 24 to 36 hour time frame to get a more accurate picture of what's really going on in your blood.
Sophie, do you think anything about triglycerides?
No, Jerome basically said everything that I was thinking. So,
Yeah.
I'm not going to repeat it. He just said it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about? We got no more questions apparently, so we can just, I don't know, just sit here and just chat about stuff, I guess. Not many questions today. What a shame.
No, and I'm on here
Might-
as well. And I
might
clearly
press
have
some
the best
buttons.
answers to them.
Press some buttons.
Okay. Press some buttons. Well,
Yeah.
I am going to leave you chaps to it because I've got a few things to sort out before I settle down for bed. I've been at work all day today. I'm going to throw your keyboard at the fucking window.
Yeah, I'm going to get more sounds soon. I can be
You're
bothered to download them.
No. You're going to somehow mute it.
Is that just a piece of software that you use, Jonathan, and then you bind different sound effects to different keys on your keyboard, or are you clicking like a soundboard?
Just take it away from it. Just get rid of it. You can't reach then, can they?
Well, I'm pressing buttons. I can do all sorts. I can do this one.
You're
I like
honestly
that
like
one.
a kid with a new toy.
Well, I think
Yeah,
it's
it's
safe
quite
to say
similar.
that you're pushing some of Sophie's buttons right now, too.
Yeah. Yeah, don't push it. I've been at work all day today. Literally had like a half an hour, 45-minute break, and that's been it.
Yeah, I've had a few breaks today. I've needed a break.
Yeah.
Yep.
Been on the go the whole time.
On the go. Yeah, not bad.
Right. I will leave you chaps to close off.
Thanks for all your help and expertise tonight. Hopefully you have a good evening and stuff.
Yeah, that's it. Just get me on for the brains. You know what I mean? That's why I'm here.
Just the difficult questions we get you on for.
I get the very tricky ones. And I think I answer them to a T. I think it's fantastic.
Exactly.
All right then. Nice to see you boys again.
It's good to see you, too.
Speak to you another time.
Well, we
Bye for now.
Bye.
do have a question here. I don't know if you saw it.
Press the button. Excellent. We can put our overlay back on now. That's better. Press the buttons. Okay. Ellen, I can't even read this. Eleanor Whatever. Someone asked, I'm eating carnivore for 2 years except for Saturdays. Now I've been 8 weeks strict. My strength is good, but my cardio sucks. Gone from running comfortable 4.3 minutes per kilometer to 5 minutes 10 seconds a kilometer hard. I'll see. I tried small amounts of carbs yesterday. Went back to 430. What is the best way to get more adapted fast? Do you have any thoughts, Jerome? I'm just going to read this question again a couple of times because I'm not sure if I've entered it correctly.
Sure. So if I understand correctly, been eating strict carnivore for 2 years, every Saturday, have some carbs. And when running without those carbs, the performance has suffered. So he or she tried having those carbs and running performance went right back to where it was. So I think that's one point. And then the second point is the question, what's the best way to get more adapted fast? And if hopefully I understand that correctly. And addressing the first point, I would look at the studies by Steve Finney and Jeff Volek on endurance cyclists. And they tested people who were basically on a glucose-based diet versus fat-adapted athletes. And it's worth mentioning that just because you're on a low-carb or ketogenic diet does not mean you're fat-adapted. Fat adaptation can take anywhere from a number of weeks to quite a few months, depending on just an individual's genetics and activity level and how consistent they are with their diet. But the point of the study showed that not only exercise performance was the same, but the resynthesis of muscle glycogen was the same in fat adapted athletes versus their glucose based counterparts when they were provided with an isocaloric post workout shake of either carbohydrate or fat, respectively. So I bring that up because a lot of people initially, when transitioning to a carnivore diet or a ketogenic diet, will notice an acute dip in performance. And I really think you're carnivore most of the time, but you're just not fat adapted. True adaptation probably just hasn't occurred to where your body has upregulated all of the hormones and enzymes necessary because you're having a somewhat frequent ingestion of carbohydrate. So until that process actually occurs, you could probably just suffer through the shorter run times and know that they will get better once you get adapted. Otherwise, the best way that you could do that if you're having carbs every single Saturday is to gradually phase them out or just cut them entirely. But your gastrointestinal tract, your microbiome will probably thank you if you just gradually phase them out over 6 to 8 weeks on Saturdays instead of just cutting them all at once. And it's the best way to get fat adapted. I mean, really, it's fasting. Fasting is going to get you there probably faster than anything else. But depending on your body composition, your lifestyle, that's not always a viable option.
Yeah, nothing really much to add to that. What I'd be curious of is you're just diet in general. Like if you're taking in, I don't know, if you're eating, say, 200 protein, 200 carbs, 100 fat on Saturdays, usually, but then you're eating 200 protein, 100 fat, and you're not making up for that food deficit in terms of the carbohydrates, but adding that amount onto the fat, then you're not going to have as much energy to perform because you're not giving your body that baseline amount that you've usually been having. So probably increase your fat gradually. But yeah, Jerome's completely right. The quickest way to get fat adapted is just to not eat anything. There is no quicker way to do it that I can think of. No. I mean a 3-day water fast plus some light activity, like just some walking around and stuff, that'll probably do it. I don't think there's anything revolutionary. You just need to stick to the diet properly. That's it. There's nothing we can really do to speed that up. Wish there was a pill, like a ketone powder or pill that did it for us.
Yeah.
Imagine that, Jerome.
Yeah. Jonathan's making a clever remark. I have a client that sells exogenous ketones, and I'm not particularly a fan of exogenous ketones outside of some very narrow circumstances. But in general, it's not something I'd recommend. You may be interested in looking at Zach Bitter. I mean, if you're performing at a somewhat competitive level, either recreationally or maybe semi-professionally or even professionally, maybe you can't afford to have that acute dip in performance, and you need to figure out how to time carbohydrate around your activity to get the best performance possible. In which case, I think Jonathan and I, until you're truly fat adapted, would probably both be in favor of timing some carbohydrate around your physical activity to maintain a certain degree of athletic performance. But that's something that you would really probably have to work out in a consultation with Jonathan. But if you want an endurance runner who's a carnivore basically all the time, except for when he runs, like ultra marathons, look up Zach Bitter. He was on Sean Baker's Human Performance Outlier podcast a number of times. Carnivore pretty much all the time. And I think he has a little bit of carbohydrate. It's just to top off his glycogen stores a little bit before a race. I think so, at least.
Yeah, he does something like that. Yeah, he said that he does something to sort of improve his metabolic flexibility. So he adds in these things frequently enough that he doesn't feel bad for it, but not so frequently that he's not completely fat adapted. So once that glycogen store from the sugar that he's taken is knocked out, he's then burning body fat. So yeah, that's a good show actually. Yes, the Stephen Finney and Volek stuff and the Zach Bitter stuff online. They're hours and hours of podcasts. They'll teach you how to do it very effectively, I think. A question from Ben. So thank you for the super chat. Much appreciated. Best protocol to increase VO2 max? I'd have to ask the VO2 max for what? Like for bench pressing as fast as possible, for as long as possible, or if it's just walking or cycling, probably to do that. So either to run or cycle. Probably, I'd say if it's the only training you're doing 3 to 4 times per week, and that would depend on the performance that you're trying to get out of it. I'd probably actually mix in cardiovascular routines, if that makes sense, which is a bit unusual, but I'll probably have someone doing 2 sets of sprint or two days of sprints in a week and 2 days of long endurance activity. So I'd get a mix in there, just because you're not specifying the reason for the VO2 max sort of thing, if that makes sense. Yeah, in terms of like what you can do is it's going to taper up. The fitter you get, the harder you have to work to maintain that fitness. So me, if I want to get fitter right now, all I have to do is to go cycle my bike twice a day rather than once a day for like a quarter of an hour. That's going to increase my VO2 max. Now to get a very high VO2 max where I'm going to be performing at a high level, that's going to be much more intense. I'm going to do it the same period of time, just much more intense. But I think the key is just to increase the intensity, the difficulty level of the exercise that you're doing. Just be cautious not to let it, not to make it so you overreach or overtrain. So monitor everything else. So if you're going to add in some of this sort of stuff, then maybe 3 days a week in the gym, 2 days a week of cardio. So you'd be doing probably either 2 days of sprints or 2 days of endurance runs. That's pretty what I'd do. If you've got a more specific question, I'll be able to address that a bit better, I think. But just let me know in the chat and I'll respond there. So what do you think, Jerome?
Yeah, I'm not the biggest fan of VO2 max testing because it can be very, very context specific. And I'll have to go back and find the post. I'm pretty sure I had on one of my Facebook business posts a number of weeks or months ago, but I was looking at a study where they tested baseline VO2 max on a stationary bike for each leg one at a time, and then also one of those hand bikes one at a time. And then for a set duration of time, these individuals they did those exercises, but with only the right side of their body. So they did the hand bike with just the right arm and the stationary bike with just the right leg. And both of those exercises respectively had increases in VO2 max. But then after like 6 or 8 weeks, they tested the left side of the body, and the left side had no improvement over the baseline of VO2 max. And the idea is that when we think of cardio, we tend to think that it's very heart specific, but really a lot of the improvements that happen in cardiovascular performance are due to increased neuromuscular efficiency of whatever motor pathway that we're performing, but also upregulations in certain enzymes within the specific muscles that are working. A lot more of the positive adaptations in cardio happen in the peripheral, in the muscle tissue, than within the heart and the blood vessels. So VO2 max is very activity dependent. Now, it is in general a good marker. Someone who in general has a higher VO2 max probably has better cardiovascular and exercise performance and potential. But I wouldn't put a lot of stock into it as a metric of health, athletic performance, or cardiovascular performance.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, I remember that. I remember that post now you say it, actually. That was a great post. If anyone's not following Jerome on, I think it's Facebook, check out his stuff. He posts articles, I believe, earlier in the week every week. And they're very well thought out and they're very helpful, actually. So people like us that are interested in like fitness, building muscle, losing fat, great stuff. So I recommend checking that out. And his channel also as well, which is Jerome Armstrong, which is spelt how it sounds pretty much.
Thanks for the plug. Yeah, most of the content that I'm currently putting out online is basically supplemental information for my clients so they understand why I do some of the things I do here in the studio. And a lot of my Facebook business posts are more geared towards people in the surrounding community, and they're just more health and fitness posts in general. But I tend to get pretty granular into some of these studies and their implications. So thank you. I try and be a good source of information on these topics.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. Spencer's asked, are time static contraction squats a good option for someone dealing with knee pain with regular squats? I'd say so, yes, because you're limiting the range of motion. You can control the force output as you're doing it. And there's limited chances for you to get injured because you're not on either extreme of the range in probably every case. So I'm quite a big fan of it. I've actually been adding not time static contraction, but isometric wall sits for quite a bit of time now, maybe like 2 months. And I found it's actually probably given me a bit of development in my legs, my quads. And it's great because you can change your stance very easily if you've got bad knees. Even the tibia in relation to the floor, you can change the angle as well. So you can change a lot of variables of it, and it's very easy to do. So if you know, going knees over toes hurts your knees, then okay, you just put your feet further out. So it's a great method. I think it's useful. I think it's good to have some kind of movement aspect of your training as well. So if you can do any bodyweight squats or anything where you actually move the weight, it's probably better overall. If you're so limited and your knees hurt that much, I'd look at, dealing with the knee pain somehow, maybe using this as an adjunct to stimulate some blood flow and still retain some strength. Jerome, what do you think? Because this is more your area of expertise, I think.
Yeah, if anyone has any kind of joint pain, the general protocol that I use is figure out where in the range of movement it tends to be an issue. And you see that with a lot of people, and you don't have to use a lot of weight to figure that out. And then you want to get to maybe within like 5 to 10 degrees of that where you can start to feel that discomfort or that pain. Work a partial range of movement or an isometric or time static contraction very close to that point. And then you also need to somewhat control the intensity for that too. So sometimes even a high degree of intensity can be painful in a joint when in actuality it should be extremely uncomfortable for your muscles. So if it's painful in the joint and you're doing an isometric or a time static contraction or a partial range of movement exercise, then you want to back off the intensity just a little bit to where it's not painful anymore, because you're still trying to reap the positive benefits of that exercise. But that's a really brief kind of primer to, in general, how to work around joint issues that people may have. My only concern with time static contraction squats is the amount of force output can be really, really high in a time static contraction. So really take your time with it. I've been experimenting with TSC protocol, actually stretching it out to 2 minutes to further fatigue the legs, so that when you're going for that last 15 seconds all out effort, or sorry, I should say as hard as you dare, that your actual force output is even lower. But yeah, it can be a great option, but you have to perform TSC correctly. You don't just want to go in as hard as you can right from the onset. That's way too much force.
Yeah, I like that. I've been using that recently for triceps, funny enough. So I think you suggested it to me, like, we talked about it maybe like 2 months ago, 3 months ago, and you sort of said, yeah, I just do a time static contraction isometric with triceps. I was like, maybe I'll do that. And my elbows now feel better than they did before. So
yeah, and that's the best pump I get in my triceps is a 90-second time static contraction, about halfway through the range of movement. Arms at like a 90-degree angle, just pushing against an immovable object. Yeah, it feels great on my arms, and I've never had a pump like that on my triceps.
Yeah, same. I've been using the V bar recently, that one, and I've just been shoving the outside of my hand to the outside of that like grip when I do it. It seems to activate my outer head a bit more, which is weak as hell. I've got like no triceps, guys, so I have to eke out all the gains I can out of the movements I have. So for me, it's been really useful. But yeah, I do recommend that sort of movement. People do have bad elbows sometimes. My strength's going up again, by the way, Jerome. Funny enough, despite my dieting. Very surprised. More questions. Another one from Andrew. So, in your experience, you guys believe that exercise and a keto or carnivore diet increases the resting metabolic rate? What would make easier to lose fat and keep it off? Good question. Good question. I know what I think, but there's caveats to it. So I think if you were to measure it by energy intake and that as equated, and I think you had someone doing carnivore and you had someone doing omnivorous mixed diet sort of thing. Let's say the protein was the same, but the carbs and fats are split either to 50-50 or 100% fat sort of thing. I think the metabolic rate would be the same between the two people, as in the amount of energy they exercise, the amount of ATP, whatever they produced. However, if the person is under eating, as in they're not tracking their food and equating it, I can see the person on keto carnivore diet having a slower metabolic rate because they're eating less food. You're less likely to binge eat or eat too much food on a keto carnivore diet because, one, there's less food to eat. Two, you're missing a whole macronutrient for the most part. And three, just free for the sake of saying number three. So what do you think, Joe? I mean, this is quite an interesting question because we can't really study this very well.
There's some nuance. I think if you're getting enough fat to have close to the hormone production that you should have, I would say that the resting metabolic rate on a mixed macronutrient diet versus a keto or carnivore diet, I would say that number is probably the same. But per the mass balance model, I would suggest that somebody who's eating an equal mass amount in terms of a mixed diet versus a keto carnivore diet can eat more food calories on a keto carnivore diet than someone on mixed macronutrient diet. And the quick explanation for that is we tend to think of food in terms of how many calories per gram. But if we invert that and we think of how many grams do I get for a certain number of calories, well, if you have more fat in your diet, then you're going to have a smaller total grammage of food to hit the same number of calories. And this is something I've talked about in a video that I've done in the past. And it can be a significant difference. It can be like 20 to 30% difference between a mixed macronutrient diet and a keto carnivore diet, depending on your macronutrient ratios in each one of those diets respectively. So I would say that your actual resting metabolic rate would probably be the same, but given how with the Randall cycle, carbs and fat do not play nice together when they're co-ingested, I would suggest that somebody could eat more food calories and probably have better health outcomes if following a keto carnivore diet. And I think we see this anecdotally. Andre follows a number of YouTube fitness influencers that I follow, and I don't want to name names, but a lot of these guys will recommend a protein target, and then they'll say, the rest, the carbs or the fat is kind of at your discretion. And one of these individuals used to recommend eating a fairly even amount of both. So you'd have about 200 grams of protein a day, maybe 200 to 250, and then the same number of calories from carbs and the same number of calories from fat. But if you actually see the amount of food that these guys eat to get lean, these are guys that are eating like 1,400 to 1,600 so-called food calories a day. Well, if Jonathan or I ate that few calories on a carnivore diet, we would waste away to nothing. Jonathan, I assume he's in a fat loss mode right now, and so am I. But like the most aggressive I'm taking my fat loss in terms of calories on a keto or a carnivore diet is like 2,100 a day. And Jonathan, I assume, is probably eating more than that. No? And okay.
The same, if not less, Jerome. I'm cutting hard.
Okay. I was going to say, we'll leave that for your video that's coming out soon. But in my own N=1 experiment, and also people that have worked it, but solely speaking for myself, I can eat like 3,000 to 3,500 so-called food calories a day on a carnivore diet and maintain my weight, strength, and body composition. But if I eat that many calories on a mixed macronutrient diet, I'll get fat. I will add fat to my body. And to me, my metabolic rate really hasn't changed in that regard. But what has changed is I'm eating more food per the mass balance model, and I'm more inflamed because of the Randall cycle with the co-ingestion of fat and carbohydrate.
Yeah, you brought a good point there. It's like the meat, fruit, and honey experiment video that I did. Well, I gained fat. Like I physically felt my body get fatter within 3 days of eating fruit and honey, versus eating, a trace amount of carbs from dairy and eggs and stuff like that. Weird, but yeah, I think the metabolic rate. I think the metabolic rate between two diets, assuming calories equated, proteins equated, is the same. But I think that how those calories or food amounts affects our body composition is different.
Mm-hmm.
In that there's like an amplification of possible fat gain from having carbohydrates in through the mass balance model, the carbohydrate insulin model. So it does seem to me like, well, actually, let's go on a different point. So people would say, okay, calories equated, protein's the same, fat loss is the same between two dieting groups over a 12-week period. That's what the studies often say, but they don't talk about adherence. They're not well-formed studies. They're not lock-in metabolic ward studies. They're just guesses for the most part. And honestly, a diet that is ketogenic or carnivore will be a lot more satiating, pleasing, and you'll feel better doing it. The problem is, if people cheat on that diet, then they won't get the benefit. If you're going to have, like someone said earlier, I'm having whatever it is on a Saturday, whatever carbs on Saturday. Okay, fine. People do what they want. That's up to them. But you're potentiating the fact that you might binge more and more and more because you're not getting rid of that addiction. If you constantly have it in there, you say, oh, every week I get to have this. Then yeah, of course you're going to sort of look forward to it and anticipate it. So I think the thing about the carnivore diet is it does really work. You just have to stick to it. That's the thing. I notice myself, if I take, like I said earlier, if I take 3 days off a diet, whether that be eat too much carnivore or non-carnivore foods, my mindset's different after that. My brain's rejigged. So without a goal in sight, like a competition, then it's not a good idea for me. But for me right now, it's weird because I'm cutting on like 2,000 calories a day or something stupid, which is like nothing to me. It's like starvation amounts. I wake up at 5 a.m. starving. But I'm doing it for an experiment just to see what can happen. And honestly, it's tough, but I know it'd be a lot tougher if I was eating rice rather than fat. I know that because I've tried it both ways. So,
and I apologize I wanted to look up the name of a study that I'm about to reference. So I apologize for not giving you my attention for all of that.
It's a good study, though.
Yeah, there's, the PHC UK, and I forget what the C stands for. Public
Sam
Health.
Feltham.
Yeah, the consortium in the UK has a list of over 60 studies that show an advantage to low carb dieting over a carbohydrate based diet model. And some of these studies were controlled with isocaloric diets. So the study that is most often used, especially with this individual that me, Jonathan, and Andre are both probably thinking of, is an underfeeding study done by Hall. But the mass balance model that me and Jonathan keep going back to, that tracking macronutrient ratios is going to be a far better predictor of long-term changes in body composition, was created in part to try and explain why low carbohydrate diets have a significant advantage in terms of long-term weight loss over their isocaloric counterparts. To my knowledge, there are currently 4 studies out with the mass balance model, and one of them solely looked at studies with isocaloric diets between high carb and low carb diets. But the study I mentioned, if you just search for the mass balance model perfectly fits both Hall et al. Underfeeding data and Horton et al. Overfeeding data. You can go way into the weeds with that study. Low carb diets per the mass balance model are far more effective on a calorie per calorie basis because there's more energy with fewer grams of food. So yeah, I apologize to keep preaching mass balance model, but given that the calorie in, calorie out is the mainstream narrative, and by definition, it has to be less efficient than following a mass balance model. I just keep trying to hammer this point home.
Yeah, I think sometimes we can't say it enough. Like we say it pretty much every video we make. It's said it like probably twice, I imagine. You've got videos on it, I've got videos on it, you know. But it's funny, I meet a lot of people that I speak to online. They're like, "Oh yeah, I'm on this many calories." I'm like, "I don't care how many calories. What do you eat in a day?" I eat about I eat a steak. Okay, you ate a steak, so you obviously weighed it to know how many calories it has. I want to know how much protein you're eating a day. I want to know how much fat you're eating a day. I want to know how many carbs you're eating, and I want to know what food you're eating. I don't care how many calories it is, because like you said, it could be 4,000 calories of, I don't know, blackcurrant, like something really daft, So what's the point in telling me that? I need the food gram amount is the best way to measure.
Yeah.
So I've had people before say, I eat about 3,500 calories a day. I do the maths myself and they tell me what they're eating and it's way off by like 30-40%. And it's nearly every time.
Yeah.
I had a conversation with someone recently and I think really friendly guy actually. And I think he tried to work out my macros based on what I said in my intake. And I think he worked me out as having 100 grams of protein a day. But it's about 150, like on my calculator. I'm like, how are you measuring your protein intake? I think he got confused between raw and cooked weight. I think he said he was eating 600 or 700 grams of protein a day, but it actually worked out. I looked later, it's like 450. I'm like, that's a significant difference. That's like a person's worth of food each day. So, you have to get your calculations right. So one day, guys, I'm going to make a video and I'll explain how to track food, how to weigh food, and just say it in layman's terms and everyone can see it and think, oh, now I don't have to keep talking to Jonathan about calories. So it does.
Yeah.
And the things I want to tell people, that's why I want to know the truth. I want to know the details,
And if you were in university and you ran a scientific experiment in chemistry class and your experimental error was, 30 to 50% in terms of how much we're tracking calories, even if it's 20%, I don't know about you, but when I was in university, like our margin for experimental error was extremely small. The one advantage that a calorie focused approach to diet has is it's very simple and it's very easy for people to look at it mathematically. But when we think about how different calories act differently in the body and how calorie counting skews more closely towards eating more and more highly processed foods because that number is right on the label and you don't have to you don't have to weigh out your blueberries that you're eating. You can just know that one can of SpaghettiOs is like 210 calories or whatever. It makes that easier, but it's naive to the fact that food will react very differently in the body based on how people eat. And you can see how fruitarians can eat a decent number of calories, but they waste away to just skeletons and versus people who eat an isocaloric amount of food on the carnivore diet and turn into, a sexual tyrannosaurus.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like the conversation I had with my friend Jareth, like, was it last week or something? We did a 3-hour live podcast. We're just talking about fitness, diet, myths and stuff. I was like, yeah, the calories thing doesn't really work. I don't really know anyone that's had great results with it. At least like repeatable results where they've tried it and it's worked. He's like, oh no, it works for me nearly every time. I'm like, it does work, but there's a better way to do it. As in, it does work, but you have to undershoot your food intake so much to know you're in such a deficit. That's the problem. That's how. So, for example, say someone ate 2,000 calories in a day and they want to lose weight. Okay, the idea is, reduce by 500 calories each day, you lose a pound each week. Well, that doesn't really work. I've never done that myself, so I've tracked it and been on the dot. So I've actually had like midget gems in front of me to equate for the right amount of carbohydrate. So, and I've never exactly got a pound of fat loss or weight loss in that time. So So people have to undershoot it more and more and more. So that 2,000 calories is being 1,200 calories plus an hour of cardio a day. I'm like, well, obviously it doesn't work. Otherwise, why would they have to undershoot so much to achieve that 1 pound weight loss per week?
Yeah.
It's frustrating, but we live and let live. One more thing on that is you touched on a good point as well about comparing isocaloric diet. So what I recommend to Andre to look up online, put in his tabs, whatever, is there's some videos by someone called Sam Feltham, and he actually, I believe he organizes the PHC UK, and he did some experimental videos where he talked about, a keto diet versus a normal diet. And he tried all these diets and he equated the calories or something like that. And he's like, well, yeah, how comes I can eat 3,700 calories of food per day and not get fat, whereas I do the same thing with carbohydrates in it and I gain loads of fat? And I think he tried a vegan diet as well, something like that. But he tried all these different diets. He's like, obviously the ketogenic diet lets you eat the most amount of food with the most nutrient density, so obviously it's the best diet, and he adhered to it best out of all the diets, funny enough. So that's an anecdote right there, but it does mean something, I think.
There's a great documentary that was on Netflix that might be on YouTube now. I think it was called That Sugar documentary or That Sugar movie. And a guy worked with a nutritionist to go from the calories that he was eating to the same number of calories, but he was eating a significantly larger amount of just added sugar in his meals. And he ended up gaining something like 15 or 20 pounds of body fat over a number of weeks, keeping his calories the same, but just drastically increasing his sugar intake. The calorie model, you're right,
Yeah.
it does work, but you have to undershoot your calories so ridiculously low to account for how off nutrition labels can be, and to account for the fact that at best measuring calories is a very loose approximation, and you have to be consistent with that number for a very long period of time. And I keep going back to the people that me, you, and Andre know that are men that are eating 1,400 to 1,600 calories a day. I'm like, that's a meal for me or Jonathan. That's one moderately large size meal, but I could eat like 2 or 3 of those bad boys a day. And I just, it works, but it's a very inefficient way to get it done. You could hop on your bicycle and go from New York to LA, but you're better off just hopping in a car. You want the more efficient approach. You want the better approach. And that's why we preach the mass balance model.
Yeah, I've had a lot of logically minded people see me saying like calories in, calories out doesn't really work, and they're like, no, it's maths, it's science, it's proven. Every study proves it. I'm like, every study proves that eating less food will result in you weighing less. Yes, obviously, you put less food into your system, you're not going to be as heavy. It's obvious.
Mhm.
But in terms of the accuracy of that and how that affects your body composition, it's a completely different ballgame. I don't know. I'm just stop ranting about this.
I usually address that by saying when people reduce calories, they're inadvertently following the mass balance model. By reducing calories, they're reducing mass. And it's the reduction in mass, not the reduction in calories, that's causing the weight loss or fat loss.
Yeah, I think I'd always be battling this one.
Yeah.
I think I don't want, when I'm consulting with people, I don't want to step on their toes and be rude and try and correct them, because then I've got to explain what we've just spoken about.
Yeah.
And what I found is to talk about everything in that circle, every question you could possibly have, it takes at least an hour. So then they've come to me asking me how to, I don't know, build an inch on their arms or something. I'm talking to them about why calories are a load of horseshit. So it's like, I don't know. I've made enough videos now. Sometimes just smile and nod and just go with it. But yeah, never mind. Try and be agreeable sometimes. I think it's a question. So Matthew only deals well with lean fat. And he thinks it may be a histamine reaction, or maybe IBS, or it could be the quality of the beef. It depends what digestive issue you're talking about. If it's acid reflux, that'll be a different reason for symptomology than if it was diarrhea. So I'd have to know which digestive issue it was.
I'm not too sure on that. I don't really know anything of value about histamine. So I think if somebody asked me this question directly, I'd probably just blow up Jonathan's phone, see what he has
Yeah.
to say.
Yeah, I think histamine's a thing nowadays. Is more popular. People self-diagnose with it, but it's not something which I ever really. I think I've spoken to one person now ever that has had a test and has been diagnosed as histamine intolerant or something. So it tells me it's not a very common thing. And if it was as bad as people were saying it was, then you'd have everyone coming out saying they've got it and everyone having a test for it to try and prove that, So I don't know. It's most likely IBS, but it could be that just the meat you're eating isn't right, as in your assumptions here are probably correct. You're probably eating either too fat or too lean. Your body's not dealing with either too much protein or too much fat at a given time. It depends as well on your symptoms like acid reflux, or if it was diarrhea as well. That would impact what I'd suggest to you. So yeah. So yeah, high histamine foods are usually more processed, more aged. If you get them fresh from the butcher, you can't go too wrong. Stuff you get in supermarkets has been out for weeks and weeks and weeks. So some people have issues.
And if you like slow cook a roast, won't that have more histamine in it than like if you sliced it thin and just pan fried it and ate it that way?
It will have more histamine in it. Yeah, it'll also have less taurine in it. Some of the vitamin C will titrate out more so than other cooking methods, but the digestibility of it from the standpoint that it's softer, more tender, will kind of negate some of that. So it swings and roundabouts ultimately. Okay. I think it's like the raw versus cooked meat. It's like there's benefits to both. People tend to have mostly cooked beef, so that's not going to be a problem. Otherwise, you'd have everyone coming out and saying, "I can't digest, I don't know, a ribeye steak that I cooked on the barbecue," sort of thing. Yeah.
It just made me think I cook everything rare, even burgers. So hopefully I'm getting the best of both worlds.
I just press 2 buttons on my air fryer and hope something edible comes out.
That's a good approach.
I don't like thick with stuff. Yeah, no matter what it is. If it's like a beef burger that thick, I'll just put it in for 10 minutes to see what comes out, and I just eat it. I don't really care. I just cook it to appear normal. I think appear normal. I don't know. I think if I was alone on an island, I didn't have people watching me and stuff, I probably just wouldn't care. Yeah.
I have a lot of
questions.
Yeah, I have a lot of days like that too, where I just don't feel like cooking, so I'll just eat some beef patties raw, or some bacon. I'll just eat right out of the package while the rest is cooking up.
Yeah, that's so bad. I do that with cheese, but no one laughs at that day. Yeah. What are your plans for the week, Jerome? What's your plans for your channel and stuff?
Yeah, I'm way behind on creating new content. I've been wanting to put out a video on time static contraction, but this is going to be a presentation style video, so I really want to give it its due diligence. I need to make more business Facebook posts, but things have been picking up around here. And today, Monday especially, with a number of new clients coming to the studio within the last few weeks, has picked up quite a bit. So today's been pretty much clients right into this. And I in 8 minutes, I have to leave to go pick up my daughter from school. So that's kind of what's new with me. But what do you have coming out soon?
Lots of exciting, good new videos. I've made one video which is coming out, which is about fat loss, I think. So it's a rapid fat loss kind of dietary approach, like a protocol. I've made this because people keep asking about what I'd recommend. And I think I've kind of put together my thoughts in like a mind map, and I've come up with probably the best diet you can probably follow and sustain and do without like wanting to die for about 2 weeks, basically. I basically worked it out for a lot of my experience. I read some studies and come up with it myself. So it's nothing revolutionary. It's not like anything out of the blue. It's not going to change people's thought process, but I'm basically trying to teach people how to feel satiated from food, how long to do the diet for, how much protein, how much fat to eat. It's just a rough guideline. People can try it from there and see how it works. But I give a lot of caveats throughout the video, so it's quite thoughtful. So it should be quite helpful. yeah, I'm gonna try and make more content like that now. Trying to diversify a little bit from the carnivore space, because all of us carnivores are getting hidden. I know of at least 4 people right now, 4 other relatively decent sized YouTube channels that are being hit, apparently, in terms of like the viewership. So it's not great. And I've experienced that myself. So I've gone from 32,000 views per month to about 24, 25. So my latest videos, you'll see, guys, on the views, they're crap. But the like ratios, the likes are as much as what they would be before. The same sort of views, the same, what's the word? How long they watch the video for, the watch out. It's all the same. It's just that the algorithm isn't chucking the videos out, basically. That's what it is. So, very frustrating. But try and diversify a little bit, try and do a bit more stuff about building muscle, a bit more talking sort of stuff about like protocol, a bit more flashy, sensationalistic sort of stuff, but at the same time still being very honest and truthful. The core principles of my channel. So
excellent.
All right, I'll leave this here now, guys. Thanks very much for joining tonight. Thank you for the super chats as well. Much appreciated. I'll see you guys hopefully next week. Jerome may be here, he may not be here. Sophie may also or may not be here. Hopefully they are, but wait until then. So take care, guys. Good.